Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm coming to you from the coast of Maine. We don't have any major battlefields, but we definitely had our share of revolutionary activity. And one of those places was Machias, Maine. That is where the first naval battle of the American Revolution happened. It was June 21st, 1775. It was a couple weeks, or it's about 2 months after Lexington and Concord. Um, Costa, Maine, Machias is about 6 hours north of Boston. It was ruled by Massachusetts. It was part of Massachusetts, but it was definitely a borderland. You had, and it was an intersection of cultures because you had the English settlers, the American settlers coming up from Massachusetts. You'd had French Jesuit missionaries. You had Wabanaki living here, the Penobscot and the Passamaquoddy tribes. You had some German settlements, some Scotch-Irish settlers, and a lot of these settlers had fought in French and Indian wars. So Machias, Maine was settled in about 1760. It was a young settlement, and 1774 they had a crop failure. They were weakened, and the British troops in Boston needed provisions, preferably mostly firewood. And they were also concerned of rebellion up here, even though they were in a weakened state. They sent a merchant, Ichabod Jones, up here, but they sent him escorted by the armed ship, the Margaretta. And he came up here. The settlers, they were told, you have to give us provisions or you're going to starve. But they didn't want to go against the American cause. And Jeremiah O'Brien, who's a legend up here, essentially pulled together this ragtag group of French and Indian War veterans and local people, and they drove them out and chased them out of the harbor, and they ended up capturing the Margaretta and the merchant ships. The Margaretta eventually, it was deemed unusable and it essentially rotted in the harbor. It sunk. And they believe they have found it last spring off the coast of Jonesport, which is half an hour down the coast from Machias. But they used measurements and everything. Those artifacts from that ship and during that time period are in the Burnham House Tavern. The Burnham Tavern Museum. That was built in 1770, and it was like the meeting house. It was the hub of activity in that town. It is now a museum with artifacts from that time period, but also from the Margaretta and from the war. And it's kept up by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And you can tour it. But also in Machias, in the same day, we went to the Burnham Tavern Museum. They do reenacting. However, you can't really feasibly do the reenacting on the ocean. I suppose you could, but it'd be hard to educate people. I have a friend who's a Revolutionary War reenactor, and he avoids this event. He's like, it's fake. But a local historic farm, they do fictional staged battles with reenactors. He refused to go because that's not real. However, I went with my she was 10 last summer. She's 11 now, but my daughter is obsessed with this time period, and she really enjoyed it. So it was still beneficial because those reenactors are very knowledgeable historians, and and they had things set up like the cooking and toys from that time period, a tent with toys, and they had like my daughter loved doing the laundry. She won't do it at home, but when it's the scrubbing board, she'll do it. So I do think it was still very beneficial that they did that, because it's still it's very important to teach kids about history, and they're at that age that they can easily put themselves back into doing they can imagine it better than we can. So yeah. 5 minutes flies by really fast. Thank you for watching.